And that's when she turned and she was just like, Brimaz, more like Brim ass. And I was like, dude, did you see the spear that Heliod had? He was just wrecking. And hello, everyone. I'm CVM. I'm BBD, and I'm joined. And here's a guy.
I'm CVM.
He's CVM, and we are happy to be here to produce some versus videos. That's right. A little bit of versus video action. I've got a sweet new brew here. And by sweet new brew, I mean
another deck with Elspeth in it.
I've brewed this deck. We actually can't remember the last time I haven't played Elspeth. Maybe you guys could remember. I think it was sometime back in 2013. I don't know.
The old Thragtusk days.
Yeah. probably had like Terrell or Knight Errant in that deck somewhere just for value. But this is Sunny D, the Mono White Devotion deck, which I have tried to make work a million times to marginal success. But we're back at it again. This is the old Blueberry Splash version with blue for Sphinx's Revelation, Detention Sphere, and Cyclonic Rift, and good old Afara, God of the Polis. And I'm not going to talk too much about a lot of the card choices here because I've done like 3 videos on this deck before. So feel free to go back and watch any of the old ones if you want to see like in-depth rationale behind a lot of these cards. I'm just going to talk about some of the new stuff. So the big new thing is Dictate of Heliod. One of the huge issues for this deck was being able to kind of plow through bigger creatures, things like Pelucranos and the like. A lot of times it's hard to attack through those creatures, and also none of our creatures attack through Frostburn Weird except for Soldier of the Pantheon, who trades with an elemental token and a number of other things. So this deck's not very good at attacking into the mono blue deck, but Dictate of Heliod is a great way to push our guys through. And Dictate is also another source of Doomblade proof devotion, which is basically like devotion that doesn't die to a removal spell. And that's actually extremely important. Pretty much the reason that this deck has failed for me in the past is always because you have to rely on creatures to be able to provide devotion. And decks like Mono Black and like control decks with Supreme Verdict really prey on that kind of a strategy.
Yeah, you notice a lot of times when the mono blue deck is putting the pressure on against decks that have heavy creature removal, when they go Jason to bite it into Thassa is when you're just falling behind way too much. You just have no way to stop them from continuing to attack with Thassa. And with this, if you have Spear into Dictate into Heliod, he's actually pretty big at that point. So
he's a portly gentleman. Yeah,
he's a portly gentleman.
So yeah, Dictate really provides like a huge buff, especially with Elspeth. The soldiers that she makes, the soldiers of Precinct Captain and Brimaz's little cat buddies. And even the clerics from Heliod. One of the things about White Devotion is you can get to points later in the game where you're generating like 12, 16, 20 mana a turn, just absurd amounts. And being able to make 4/3 clerics instead of 2/1s is actually pretty big. So Dictate also helps attack through Jace, and unlike some of the other cards I've had in there before, doesn't die to Supreme Verdict, which is also pretty big against like Esper Control and Blue-White Control, which have historically been the worst matchups for this deck by far. So I'm really excited about Dictate. We also get Banishing Light, which serves as like detention spheres, extra detention spheres. And I'm actually playing one over a detention sphere because of opposing detention spheres, essentially. Being able to Banishing Light their detention sphere is pretty big. So there is some value there. And then Banishing Light's, again, another way to provide devotion for Heliod and Afara without them being creatures. So these are the main 2 additions to the main deck. And we also have a couple of Mana Confluence, which makes casting Revelation easier without having to play any actual blue sources. Previously, when I've played this deck, I've had to play basic islands just to make casting Revelation doable, but Mana Confluence allows you to get away without having to do that. So we can still curve Soldier into Precinct into Brimaz, and still be able to cast Sphinx's Revelation thanks to Mana Confluence. So really, that's about it for the main deck in terms of new cards and the changes that they make. And we can go ahead and take a look at the sideboard now. All right, and we are back for the sideboard. Let me ask you a question, CVM. Are you familiar with a card called Seraph of Dawn?
Yes, I am.
It is a 2/4 from Avacyn Restored with with lifelink and flying.
Yep.
And that is exactly what we're playing in our sideboard with the Dawnbreaker Charioteers and no way to target it. It is actually just a 2/4 flying lifelinker, but thanks to Dictate of Heliod and Spear of Heliod, that can actually get pretty big. And I actually really like Dawnbringer in this format a lot as a precursor to Archangel Thune. I like being able to curve one into the other because Dawnbringer is going to be able to hit the turn you play Archangel, grow your entire team, and then now you're growing 2 lifelink creatures, which can be basically impossible for a lot of aggressive decks to catch up to.
Yeah.
So I really like those 2 cards a lot, and I think that Dawnbringer Charioteers is actually going to see some play, especially because it does have upside if you can actually target it. It can kind of grow out of control, much like Archangel can. So
yeah, really all you have to do is put 1 bestow creature on it, and it becomes pretty absurd.
Yeah, any bestow creature. Something like Ethereal Armor, I could see this being a huge player in decks with Ethereal Armor as well at some point. And then we have Archangel Thune. These are awesome against decks like Mono Blue, decks like some of the monster decks if you can grow them. Especially with Spear of Heliod, letting them survive like something like Mizzium Mortars is huge.
Yeah.
And then past those creatures, we have like a Glare of Heresy and a Deicide for cards like Detention Sphere, Gods. And Glare is very good against Elspeth, which can sometimes be problematic. So these cards are in there for that reason. Deicide especially good against cards like Thassa, which is historically one of the biggest issues for this kind of a deck, is dealing with a card like Thassa. So between Banishing Light, Detention Sphere, and Deicide, we have plenty of answers for Thassa. We have Gainsay, along with Negate and Dispel. These are mainly for the control decks, but I decided to go with 1 Gainsay just as also a hedge towards Mono Blue, where you can play a counter that's still good against the control decks, but also has utility elsewhere. Same with Negate, can be good in other matchups. Dispel can be good against Burn. So all these counter spells are kind of good in certain areas, and I decided to hedge between all of them. And then Jace Memory Adept's pretty much just for the control decks. Just another powerful threat against them that they have to answer. Against control, you basically want to load up on your counters and your powerful threats. And using Dispel to protect a Jace, you can play it on turn 6, Dispel their Dissolve, and then resolve your Jace and go from there. And then between Deicide and Banishing Light and things, you have ways to deal with their Detention Spheres if they get to that point.
I also really like Jace in a deck like this post-board against the control decks, because we have cards like Precinct Captain and Brimaz that they're going to be forced to use their removal on, otherwise they're just going to lose to it, which will end up giving us that window to resolve a Memory Adept.
Yeah, I agree. And then Angel Serenity is kind of an interesting one, and that's mainly for some of the more mid-rangey decks. Decks like Monsters or Mono Blue is where you want a card like Angel Serenity that comes in over the top and really clears the way. Especially good against decks that don't have a lot of removal, because you can A, use your other creatures to fuel Nykthos to play it earlier, and then also B, they're not going to kill it afterwards. So you just have this massive flyer that's, Wrath their board or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's where Angel Serenity comes in. I don't think it's powerful enough to main deck, but it's an awesome sideboard card. So, this is the sideboard for our Blueberry Splash deck, and hopefully we can dive right in to the action.